Why do you choose those people as your guests? Like, what is the motivation that they should be your guest? When do you record those episodes? Is there a certain day? And how do you record? Do they have to come to your house to record, or are you doing it virtually? So starting with, who is your guest? Who is that person that you're selecting that's going to be a guest for your show? Which I covered it up, and my brain is just silly sometimes. The Start Down podcast. So who is that guest is the number one question.
Yeah. And I, like I said, I think my brain's a little slow too, so I may need you to run through all those again, but we'll start with who are your guests. I really try to focus on, obviously, like I said, I'm in marketing, I'm in kind of business strategy. So that's who I focus on, entrepreneurs, business owners, people that are in the field, people that have kind of done it. I call it the start down because to me, the startup is easy, right? Having a startup is easy. It's an idea, it's a thought. But the start down is when we actually get to work. And I have people that, have done it or in the trenches. I love, the story of people who are phoenixes who rise from the ashes. I love hearing those stories. I love the phoenix that are sometimes in the ashes. I've had guests in those spots. And a lot of times that's who's on. And sometimes they're in marketing, sometimes they're in real estate, sometimes they're in, I had a gentleman on last week who has amusement parks in Orlando and Las Vegas, or like amusement activities and oxygen bars. So it's just a variety of different entrepreneurs, because I really believe that's how we learn best, is hearing from, different people. And I would say it's kind of like a buffet. You take what you need and you leave the rest. But that's kind of who the guests are. The next one was, where do I get them? Correct?
That's not how I go to buffets though, Mike. I go to buffets and I say, I spent 12 whole entire dollars for all you can eat, so I'm going to eat it all. That's how I go to buffets.
Yeah, that's an epic failure though. See, because my kids and my kids I taught them, because we live in Florida, we go to Orlando, right? And the buffets are much more expensive than $12, but it's
I'm going to the wrong buffets, obviously.
Yeah. It's like $30.
Chuckarama, that's where I go.
Yeah, that's what everyone does, right? They pile their plate on. They pile up as much food as they can. I say, my kids know we go round one. What's round one? We just get a little bit of an appetizer thing or something like that. Then we go for round two, and then we go for round three. So we probably ended up eating more food than most people, but we don't go and glutton it, right? A lot of people go to the buffet and they just throw a lot on, or they're like, yeah, we're going to get as much as we can. I'm big on kind of taking my time, and that's why I'm like, hey, you miss it, don't worry. You don't get something, you mix too much. So we go. It's so funny you say that, because that's kind of like my thing that my kids always know, is that's kind of our methodology with the buffets. And I agree with you sometimes too. It's like, and I think that's an interesting business thing, right? We have to learn, when should we be getting maximum value, and when should we be getting just enough? And that's a tough lesson to learn, right? Like, I think there's a lot of gray areas there, but you bring up a good point. When do you go to the buffet and go all out? And when do you try to get just maximum value, maybe of the satiation of hunger? And I know that's probably the word, satisfying your hunger more than the value for the dollar. That's a tough balance, but I'm a fat guy, so I always eat too much, Dude,
I have to say this, it's on my mind. I've been kicked out of 2 all-you-can-eat sushi restaurants.
Nice.
One of the times I got kicked out, and they wouldn't even let me finish. Like, I could have eaten twice as much as I had eaten. And they told me I wasn't welcome back because I ate so much food. Right. Wow. And when their management turned over 2 years later, I went back to the same place, and I was so scared. I was so afraid. I walked in, I thought I was going to get kicked out immediately. And I ate at least $400 of sushi. And I'm like, are you going to kick me out? And they're like, no, why would we kick you out? This is all you can eat. I'm like, well, I keep getting kicked out, and I'm just starting to get stuffed. And I've obviously eaten more than my $40 worth, or 30 or whatever it was. Anyway, I can eat too. My son thinks I'm fat. I don't think I'm fat, but I definitely am fat at heart. I definitely eat.
I love that.
Gluttonously. But that is probably not a word. Let's move on.
It's our word. It's our word now. So,
so who you have on your podcast is entrepreneurs. It's people who've done it, or they're currently in the trenches. How do you get them on your podcast? How do you find them? Because I know a lot of people that are thinking about starting a podcast. That is like the hardest thing to do. They're like, how am I going to get a guest on my show? They don't want to come on my show. So what have you learned there?
So 2 things. Everyone's a potential guest. I think the worst thing people, it's like dating. The worst thing they could say is no. I found a lot of my guests initially from my immediate network, obviously friends, coworkers, people that maybe wanted exposure. clients. That was kind of the initial. Once I tapped that network, then obviously I went to, social media and just, threw the line out there. Hey, does anyone want to be on my podcast? Is anyone interested in coming on the show? I would get a few people there. I've started to, and then obviously there's websites. One I go to is called Podbooker. So I've gone on there and registered my podcast, and then also been able to find a lot of great guests there. So I get people reaching out to me. And then my favorite one though, Adam, is now I have former guests sending me people. So I love that I'm getting the recommendation from my guests. And I usually say to someone when I have them on their show, or if I'm on someone's shows like yours, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Or if you know anyone, any great guests that you have that you think would be a benefit to be on my podcast, they send them my way as well. So really now it's become a lot of, I would say the two main sources are kind of referral and Podbooker, really where I'm getting most of my guests.